Hey, what's up everybody? FloGrappling podcast back once again. A Fistful of Collars. Howell Teague, Reed Connell, Chase Smith laughing his ass off for some reason, and Will Safford over here in the corner, the stoic, silent rock of FloGrappling.
Right.
So, we're back again. Another week. Another week.
Yeah.
Busy week at Jiu-Jitsu, as always. Lots of stuff to dissect, lots of stuff to talk about. I think the biggest one really is the big news that everybody's talking about. It's just that we've dropped our rankings, the FloGrappling rankings, and well, this is the first time we've had any kind of ranking system in Jiu-Jitsu, right? And people are a little bit rattled by that, right? Maybe you don't know what to make of it. But first things first, let's explain it. Like, what's the deal? What's going on with the rankings?
Well, the reason why I like coming out with the rankings, man, is because IBJJF has their rankings, right? They do some things, but it can be really hard sometimes to follow the sport. You know, there's a lot of different competitions. You know, there's competitions literally all over the world. So it can be hard to know who's on the rise, you know, who's on the downturn, who's winning, who's losing, you know, and so I think that these rankings are really going to be able to black and white spell out, you know, these are the guys who are winning, these are the guys who are ranked number 1, number 2, you know, and it gives a lot of the guys who are lower ranked some some will to move up the rankings. You know, I think it's the perfect thing for fans, for everybody to really be able to follow along the sport a little easier.
And let's explain a little bit about how the IBJJF and the UAE-JJF rankings work, because they're not performance-based per se, are they, Chase?
No, I mean, when it comes to the UAE-JJF, it's about going to the events. I mean, some of these guys, Igor Silva competes almost every weekend, it seems, at a UAE-JJF, and he just dominates those. So really, it's about going to all the major events, plus you have to pick and choose which events are ranked higher. Now the UAE-JJF and IBJJF have different systems there. Because explain, the rankings that they run are actually just accumulated via points, right? Exactly. And they differ in the way you can earn these points. Of course, 1 through 3, placing there gives you points, but also certain events are rated higher, and that goes for both organizations. And we kind of consolidate all that. I think I could pass over here to Will, who helped us really formulate how we're going to do it. But we sort of take all the aggregates of all the promotions, ACB, IBJJF, super fights, and we say, okay, who is really on top here? Who's number 1 through 10 or 15? Right.
Yeah, Will, you were a big force in driving these rankings forward. You were one of the guys who were like, man, we got to bring these rankings in. We got to get this system up and running. So how did we sit down? I know how we sat down, but maybe you explain. How did we sit down and figure out how that ranking, what it looked like?
Well, we took the last 12 months of competition, UAE, IBJJF. That's one thing that separates us from the IBJJF ranking, is that it's strictly IBJJF, right? So we looked into gi competition for the last 12 months going back, and took into consideration not only participation, which is a lot of UAE JJF, like you get points just for participating, but how you ranked the people that you went up against as well. And it was a full year look back, full 12 months looking back. So that's
yeah. So long story short, a shit ton of work went into putting these together because we had to go back through 12 calendar months of results, look at who was out there, how they were winning the matches. Because, you know, winning against some guy by an advantage isn't necessarily the same thing as going out and dominating by submission, right?
Certainly, yeah. And we just came out with yesterday the pound for pound rankings, right? Who do we put up number 1?
Oh, you have to sign online and check it out.
Yeah, you know, this is premium content, right? Because obviously FloGrappling, one of the things we're doing is we're developing the amount of content that we're releasing and we're putting out there. And, you know, for our members, obviously they get access to the best stuff on our site. That includes techniques, that includes documentaries, and that's going to include the rankings and more stuff coming too.
Probably give away number 1, though. Let's give away number 1. It's Buchecha. And I don't think anyone's really going to be too upset about that.
It's a tough one to argue with.
It's a tough one to argue with.
Best pound for pound Buchecha out there right now. I mean,
and this is in the gi. Right now, our rankings are strictly in the gi, and so
also pound for pound is not absolute. So this does not this is not just an aggregate of how people did in the absolute, because a lot of the smaller guys don't compete in the absolute division. So number 2, we have a guy who doesn't really compete too often in the absolute division. So this is a good kind of aggregate of everybody who competes in the gi for the last 12 months.
That's right. It's our, hopefully, you know, by pooling our sort of, you know, our viewpoints of jiu-jitsu together, because we all see things a little differently, but that kind of creates, hopefully, a balanced view of the sport as general, right? And so, fingers crossed, you guys will like it. More to come. We'll be releasing one weight class every day up until all 10 rankings have been released, and then we'll be updating that after PANS and every major tournament that comes around. And anytime anything happens anywhere, you know, you should see a change in that ranking, so make sure to keep an eye on that.
And if you guys have hate mail, it's Howl at Flow Sports.
Yeah, Chef.
He will answer all your questions.
It should be easier to follow, I think, going forward, because like we mentioned, it's 12 months of competition. It's a lot to sort of consider, and not everyone's going to agree. However, moving forward, the rankings are going on a one-by-one basis on these major events, and you should be able to start predicting maybe how the changes will happen in the future. So we're really looking forward to rolling this out over the next several months, and really making jiu-jitsu even easier to follow.
One thing I'm looking forward to, and you mentioned it briefly there, Reed, is that, you know, going into these tournaments such as PANS now, we'll be able to see the brackets and we'll be like, oh, wow, okay, so number 13 is going up against number 4 in this round here. That's a good chance for that guy to jump way up in that rankings, right? So I think, personally, it adds a little bit of spice to those matches, huh?
Yeah, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you don't know two guys going against each other. Where are they, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you know? And you don't know that, oh, hey, number 14 just beat number 3. That's a huge upset, you know? So that being able to put that stuff in context, I think is going to really go a long way.
I think another thing, too, is that every other sport has rankings. You know, you have standings. Yeah. All the combat sports, boxing, MMA, they all have rankings. So I think it's time that jiu-jitsu has a serious ranking system.
There we go. Go to FloGrappling.com. Check it out.
All right, moving swiftly on. So last weekend, we had a big event, IBJJF Pan Kids. Okay, so this is the one of the most important tournaments in the world for infant through to adolescent competitors. Chase, Will, you guys were there, Long Beach Pyramid, the same venue that they use for the World Championships, which comes around once a year. Kids Pans. Tell us a little bit about the tournament. What was it like when you guys were there?
Man, it's a phenomenal event. It's my second time going, and the vibe feels like a major tournament, even for adults. I mean, you're in the pyramid, the same place, the mats are the same, and the vibe is very intense. The coaching is strong, and it's a lot of fun. These kids
for these guys as well, there's a lot on the line, right?
Some come all the way from across the country and international as well. I mean, you can feel that these kids really have trained hard. They were camped for this event, and it shows in the level. And I think Will can attest to this, that some of these younger yellow and orange belts are so damn good at jiu-jitsu. It's terrifying.
Yeah, so. You said it yourself, yes, or earlier this week. You said that these yellow belts are quite literally savages.
It's true. It's true. I would not want to roll with some of them.
Okay.
These guys are awesome. They're playing super advanced games, you know, just games. I think a lot of these guys mimic their coaches, and obviously some of the best schools are in Southern California. They have kids programs. So I'm seeing guys going out there pulling, you know, doing berimbolo, fancy back takes. And
these are 8 years old.
They're super young, and they give it their all. These kids go out there and they work so hard. Another cool thing too is that you will see some of the very best takedowns. You will see the action is nonstop. These kids go after each other, flying attempts, crazy takedowns everywhere. It was fun. It was fun to be there.
Interesting. And you know, the team thing you mentioned there, being based in Southern California, there's like a really high concentration of super high level teams. You had obviously a lot of big name coaches there in the sidelines as well. I saw guys like obviously the Mendez brothers, Leticia Ribeiro, Cobrinha, and you know, an absolute ton of others. Now these are all super high level world champions right there on the sidelines coaching what is the future of the sport, right?
It's phenomenal, and you know, we're keeping up with the points race for the teams throughout the night, and we realized about an hour before the event was over, it was within 15 points for the top 3. I mean, any team could have won based on the next few finals that were happening, which just shows the level is high everywhere. They're not, Atos has won 6 times, so they've got a kind of a stranglehold. But man, there are other teams right there on their heels. Checkmat is right there. Gracie Baja is right there. And again, we have smaller teams that are from the East Coast maybe or other places that cannot bring 60-plus kids, and they are making a run as well in the top 10, like Unity, Carlson Gracie, and other schools. So
Yeah,
really fun event.
Kids programs, they're kind of like the bedrock, like the foundation for a lot of these schools, right? Obviously, you know, you got the competition teams, but that's quite a small part of what a lot of these big gyms do. And then they've got the general student base, but the kids programs are always a super important thing. So I guess there's a lot on the line for some of these teams to have a good showing at this event. Would you agree?
I would say so. Yeah, it's kind of a prediction of the future and the success of the program going forward. But cool thing I got to do was go out to Leo Vieira's academy, and he just set up this new academy, the Dojo, which is kind of like it's a very like positive environment where kids can come and do their homework. You know, a bus picks them up from school. They've got their gi all ready for them right there, and so it's a really positive training environment for them. But one thing that stuck out to me was that Leo doesn't force his kids to compete. There's no pressure. So if you want to compete, you can compete. And Checkmat has some great kids. You know, they've ranked in the adult worlds over the last couple of years. So they're obviously a very strong team. But I think that's really cool where he leaves it up to the kids. He doesn't put the pressure on them. And if they want to compete, great. If not, you're still welcome to train.
Nice. We're always so interested, I feel like, in jiu-jitsu and just covering the sport. We're always so interested in like what's next. I feel like, you know, or who's the next black belt world champion? What's the next you know, development in the guard, or what's the next, you know, what's the future of jiu-jitsu? And like, you can look no further than Pan's Kids tournament. Like, it is literally the future of jiu-jitsu. If you look at this tournament, if you watch the kids, you watch what they're doing, that stuff is going to translate over to Worlds in just a few years. Those kids are going to be winning Worlds, you know, in 5 years or something like that. So Pan's Kids is such a good predictor of the future of jiu-jitsu. It's right there.
Yeah, you nailed it right there, because a perfect example is Michael Musumeci, right? I think he's potentially the only adult black belt world champion who came through and won Pan Kids, because Pan Kids is a relatively recent tournament. Obviously, Mikey's very young, early 20s, got his black belt super young. But it just goes to show that these guys who are winning the Pan Kids, they have it. They have the ability that if they stick with it, they could go all the way and get there to literally black belt world title. It's incredible, right?
Well, to kind of promote the Pan Kids, I kind of made this montage of current black belt champions and got pictures of them as little kids. And it includes the likes of the Mendes brothers, Buchecha, Mackenzie Dern. So these guys who are the highest, they've reached the pinnacle in our sport, all started as kids.
I don't think we realize how many of those guys, like won things at yellow belt, won big tournaments at orange belt and stuff. But all those guys, like you mentioned, they all won that tournament.
Well, this starts an interesting topic about kids not just training jiu-jitsu, but competing in jiu-jitsu as well, because Pan Kids, the level is extremely high, and I think, Chase, you were the guy who mentioned it. You said that this is not a tournament for first-timers or for maybe, you know, it's going to be the guys who, they're all going to be super prepared. So it's not a tournament to test the waters, right?
100%. You know, white and gray belt, where everyone involved is extremely novice, that's fine. But as early as yellow belt, you have kids with complete games. They know exactly what they're doing. And I think that means 6 to 8 years old. I have to double check, but imagine being another 6 to 8 year old that has never competed and they're very young. They go to Kids Pans to do their first event because the whole team's going. They're gonna get destroyed. I mean, the level is very high, and that could really maybe turn them off from competing in the future. They could say, "Oh, I'm not even good at jiu-jitsu," and it's crazy to me that a 7-year-old might have doubts about their jiu-jitsu, but it could happen by competing at like a high-level event like this. So really, I think. Take a measured approach as a coach. It's important to really think, is my student ready for an international level event? Because that's what Kids Pans is.
Sometimes, though, it's not the coach's fault. The coaches that we saw at the sidelines, you know, Homer Bahal, big names, I absolutely trust those guys' judgment in putting a kid into a tournament. But there is another problem that unfortunately the coaches can't always control, and that is the fact that jiu-jitsu parents be crazy.
Be crazy.
So we saw some stuff at the weekend, right? Do you want to elaborate a little bit on some of that?
Sure, yeah. I think some of these parents have never done jiu-jitsu and don't know what it's like to compete, and don't know what it's like to lose, don't know what it's like to be on the mat. So they don't understand how hard it is to compete, to train, to win, and they just expect so much from these kids. And you know, I saw a lot of just kind of negativity in a way. You know, one parent was getting really vulgar with his daughter, who must have been like 5 years old. You know, using like really foul language with her, and
to try and like what, amp her up, or
no? After this was outside. This was after she competed.
Berating her.
Yeah. So that just turned me off at all. You know, I think Pan Kids is great. Competing as a kid is awesome, you know, but it should be a supportive environment where you're helping these kids grow, learn from their mistakes, and encouraging them 100% along the way, you know?
Yeah, the IBJJF, they're offering an amazing platform right here, right? And they have opportunities for kids to compete, all levels, all different tournaments around the world. But unfortunately, it's not really the coach's fault, it's not the federation's fault, but unfortunately some of these parents they're coming at it and they've got a really distorted point of view. Now, I kind of want to talk about that as a whole. What do you guys think about this? Because we've heard horror stories about parents giving their kids laxatives to make weight, you know, about slapping them across the face like little kids to try and get them amped up before matches. You know, the kids coming off crying in tears and then getting berated for losing or for tapping out to a submission. And these are children under the age of 10. So, you know, what do we think about kids training and competing jiu-jitsu? Is it actually maybe something that we should shy away from, or should it be done differently? What do we think?
I mean, I don't know. I think I've never really seen some of the stuff you guys are describing in jiu-jitsu like that.
I haven't either, to put it out there. I haven't either personally. I've only had positive experiences.
And I think obviously there's anomaly cases where kids' parents are too tough on them. In any sport, right? In any sport, there's going to be guys who put too much pressure, put too much expectation on the kids. But I think generally jiu-jitsu promotes such a positive experience in that way. I feel like a lot of the things that I've seen in jiu-jitsu and competition and stuff, you know, whereas a lot of times where like guys don't tap and they stop the match early, you know, I think that stuff's great. I think protecting the kids, making sure that they come off the mat, you know, all right is
yeah, they'll if one
importance.
Kid picks another one up, the referee will be ready to catch him and
yeah,
lower
I think
him down.
the IBJJF does a really good job of kind of like making sure that it is a safe and friendly environment for the kids to compete. You know, I wrestled it as a young kid, and like, not that my parents were like super hard on me or anything like that, but like I think that it really, like wrestling as a younger kid, taught me, you know, like that, hey, you got to work hard to win. You know, you can't just go out there and expect to win. You know, you got to like actually put some work in there. And it taught me like how to win. It taught me that nothing comes easy. You know,
and jiu-jitsu does the same.
Yeah, and I think those are important lessons to learn as a kid that you're going to take through your entire life, right? And so it's unfortunate, you know, that some parents take it too far. But for the most part, for me, I feel like I've seen a lot of positive things.
Did you ever see any of that, like that horror story side behavior from the parents in wrestling?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So it's not just jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, definitely not jiu-jitsu. And you know, it's hard for me to like I can look across the room and see a guy yelling at his son or something like that, you know, and who knows what's going on there really, you know. I'm not in that situation, so there could be a couple different factors, probably.
I think you'd be crazy to say jiu-jitsu is bad for kids. I mean, to me, it's such a empowering environment. You know, you work every day to get better. The coaches generally are just amazing people that want the best. Competition, I think Leo Vieira's approach of, you know, some kids more inclined to do it, go for it, and if not,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my question then. So competition can be good, but how do they handle that pressure? Is it too much pressure for them?
I don't think so. You know, I think a lot of kids want to compete. I think it's natural, especially if they've never done it. They see, you know, the older students in class wanting to go off to compete. They train hard, and they want to be part of the fun. And you know, maybe they have a good first experience, maybe they don't. And a lot of that depends on parents being reasonable with their expectations. Because ultimately, winning or losing isn't necessarily as important as like having a great trip. You know, going out to California for kids' pans, the whole thing might be a fantastic memory, even if you got, you know, out your first match. So I would wholly recommend, you know, kids compete if they want to. If they're shying away from it, there's no need to force them. But from my experience growing up, I wanted to compete. You know, I grew up surfing, and competing in surfing was a natural thing, and it was just. No one told me to. It was there. It was happening, and it was a big deal. People were talking about it. So, of course.
But let me flip this around. Then going back to the jiu-jitsu parents be crazy. that if your dad had been like psycho and saying like, Chase, you have to get up at 5 a.m. every day, you've got to be at the beach, you've got to be running sprints, you've got to be doing this, I want to see you surfing every day, you've got to make it to the top, you'd probably get to 11 years of age and be like, screw surfing, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Man, just a quick anecdote about Kerry Callout, who I think a lot of guys know in the wrestling sphere. Kerry Callout, one of the best American wrestlers basically ever, you know, and he has a story, you know, went to the Olympics, went to the World Championships, placed. It's a crazy story, but he's one of the best in the world, right? And his father was probably the ultimate crazy guy. He literally was having a problem where he was getting stuck on bottom position in wrestling, and guys were riding him out, and he was losing matches by getting rode out. And his dad said, "You don't want to get up off bottom? All right, I'm going to make you get up off bottom." And he literally got a cattle prod and would cattle prod Kerry Callout, and every time he got stuck on bottom in practice or something like that, his dad would literally...
He'd zap him.
Yeah, would zap him. and Kerry is telling this story, you know, he's 40 years old now or something like that, and obviously, like, you can't do that today. Obviously, that's something that's very, very frowned upon, and for good reason, probably.
Yeah. Frowned upon, yes, frowned upon.
But he definitely did acknowledge that he got out from bottom from there on out. You know, like he didn't get rode out the rest of the period from there. You know, like those extreme measures made him a better wrestler for whatever that's worth.
A lot of athletes' stories are kind of like this from the Olympic elite level, where they do have insane coaches, insane parents, like some kind of driving force that's unnatural. And
yeah, I'm sure those Chinese and Russian gymnastics coaches are really mellow, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And so he did. He didn't. You know, I don't want to say he hated his dad, but he didn't have a lot of love for his dad, especially in those years when he was developing in wrestling. But he definitely acknowledges that his dad made him a champion.
But he got an Olympic medal to show for it. So that's the kind of the trade-off, right?
And it's a big trade-off, and maybe there's no right or wrong here. I mean, it's tough to say how to raise someone's kid. Like maybe you have this vision for your child being an Olympic wrestler, and that's what you set them on, that path you set them on. It has consequences of maybe alienating a normal kind of relationship, but...
Well, I've got an interesting sort of a point of view about the whole competition thing, because I'm not a huge fan of kids competing at such an early age. Now, don't get me wrong, I can see the benefits of competition for Jiu-Jitsu. I absolutely think the kids should compete, but I think that maybe they should start around about the age of 11 or 12, because as you said, before that, there's such there is the possibility of these kids really getting like a traumatic experience with Jiu-Jitsu, and it's such a formative age. They associate Jiu-Jitsu with these negative feelings, negative experiences, and they just never go back. But I did some informal research when I first moved to Brazil, 2011, and I really wanted to kind of dive into almost like the secrets of success for a lot of these high-level guys. Now I'm talking members of the Gracie family, members of the original Carlson Gracie team, that were the ones that were dominating in the 90s, and everybody in between. And an interesting thing I found is that regardless of the age that they started Jiu-Jitsu, whether it was the Gracie on the mat since he was a toddler, or whether it was some guy who came to Jiu-Jitsu at 11, 12 years of age with one of his childhood buddies, none of them really took it seriously until about 14 or 15. And you look at kids up until that age, developing the whole motor coordination, the skills, are they really going to learn Jiu-Jitsu at that age? Or, is the teenage years the time when they're actually going to start dedicating themselves, and then, boom, that's when they become the high-level competitors?
I would agree with that. You know, some of these kids went out there, the Pee-wee division, they must be four years old. The ref would say, fight. And then they would just look at each other, like a deer in the headlights, and not move.
What do you mean?
You know? They're looking at the crowd and stuff, which is entertaining for us. But I mean, the kid is just like, man, he's in shock out there.
And they grab each other and they fall over. And yeah.
So there's that whole thing. Yeah, I don't think you should force this on kids at a young age, especially when, like you're saying, their coordination hasn't developed yet. That was a big thing that I could see, where some kids were just more mature, had matured physically over other kids, but they're in the same weight class, the same division, the same belt, you know? So it's just, there is a right time to introduce Jiu-Jitsu, and I think too early is too soon.
It's really, it's hard to sustain like a very focused, competitive career in any sport when you're trying to become like a world champion at 8 years old or something like that, you know, and then to sustain that for 20 years, you know, that is very, very difficult. So you do, I think there is like kind of like a finite number of years that you can really be dedicated to any sport and try to be the best at it. You know, like
you nailed it right there. Actually,
I was thinking of like the Mendez brothers, right? 26 years old and they're done. You know, and they had a coach that was very hard on them. So.
Well, you're talking about your wrestling experience as well. It makes me think because you never really see wrestling like athletes unless they're at the Olympics or something like that. Like they finish college and they're done, right? And like, well, early 20s.
Yeah, I think of a guy, Chance Marsteller, I believe his name is, and he was like a phenom, the best middle school wrestler in the country for 4 years straight, the best wrestler in high school for 4 years straight. You know, like this guy was going to be an Olympic champion, and he goes to college, and he's just like, guys, I'm done. I need to do something else. Or I can't sustain this high level every single day, you know, because he's been doing it since he was, you know, 8 years old, and he got to college, and it was just like, I feel like, you know, I don't know the full story, so I'm kind of speaking a little out of turn, but it seemed like it was just too much for him.
And then we've got in IBJJF World Championships, you've got guys over the age of 30 walking in and winning black belt world title.
There you go, yeah,
so,
that's true.
You know, well,
one cool thing I will say about the IBJJF is that you do, kids, IBJJF kids fans, you do have to win a medal. You're not getting a participation trophy. And today, everyone's getting a participant. No, you got to earn that thing. You got to earn your spot on the podium. So
for sure. I mean, I just want to bring this up before we close this topic to a this is a very well respected jiu-jitsu coach. We saw him get his coral belt at the ceremony there at the Masters Worlds last year. Jose Leon Teixeira, and this is a guy that he was one of the original founders of Gracie Barra, and he coached Renzo from like the age of 13 or 14 years of age, right? He had like Renzo in his class when Renzo was a little yellow belt and stuff. So that's the level that this guy is at, and he's known in Brazil as being one of the kind of the best kids coaches out there. And he says himself that, you know, the role of the coach in that environment with kids is not about producing champions. It's about forming good human beings. And for me, I think that's one of the most powerful things about jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, we often here at FloGrappling are so sports-centric. Sometimes we can kind of lose sight of some of the best and most fun and interesting parts of jiu-jitsu is the way that does affect your character. And I mean, as a kid, it's about having fun and sharing, right? Like not being a little bastard. And in jiu-jitsu, you can learn some lessons that way, you know, both through the guidance of a teacher or just by having a tough day on the mat. So it's a really important, I think, great part of a kid's foundation.
Humbling, jiu-jitsu, yeah.
Very cool. All right, guys, so moving on to our next topic, a little bit of a diversion from the topic of kids jiu-jitsu. Once again, Gordon Ryan is up to his old tricks. Call-outs on social media. Not the first time that I'm sure this has been discussed, but Gordon Ryan is on fire at the moment. He has been issuing call-outs left, right, and center, but the principal one that caught our attention was calling out Geo Martinez, the pound-for-pound top-ranked 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu black belt out there. And man, those 10th Planet guys in the Danaher Death Squad, they just can't stop. They're always going at it, right?
There's quite a schism these days. You know, I felt like it was pretty cordial for a long time, and maybe in the last year, it's definitely going head to head. And this is an interesting match, right?
Well, but the match is his younger brother, right?
Exactly. So Gordon's not calling out Geo. Yeah. He's making call-outs on his 16-year-old brother on his behalf.
It's a bit different.
Geo versus Nicky Ryan. Obviously, Nicky Ryan, the 16-year-old, I don't know, is he still 16? I feel like I've been calling him 16 for a couple
like 3
years.
Yeah. Always 16.
Yeah, milking it for all it's worth.
16, possibly 17-year-old Nicky Ryan. He is obviously, you know, one of the phenoms of the sport. A young kid who's been on a roll. Ended up getting third at East Coast trials for ADCC and West Coast trials. Narrowly missed out on the invite, but ended up going to ADCC and getting in last minute when Justin Rader missed weight. So
losing narrowly on points to AJ Agazarm of all people in the first round.
I believe becoming the youngest person to ever compete at ADCC. And he had called out Geo Martinez kind of earlier in a Instagram post. Didn't really gain as much traction, so then Gordon picked up the torch from there and said, this is a match that needs to happen. The 10th Planet, the highest representative of 10th Planet versus Nicky.
What do you think? I mean, Geo, he, like you said, the highest 10th Planet representative. I mean, should he even be responding to a 16-year-old kid calling him out?
Well, he didn't respond to him calling him out, right? So he didn't respond, and it wasn't until Gordon, who has a lot of clout in the jiu-jitsu community and has a lot of fans, has a big fan base that comes with him. So once Gordon got into the conversation and started demanding the match, that is when it just became too much for Geo to bear. He had to respond to it, Well,
let's explain why this happened as well. It's because one of Gordon's teammates, John Callout, who was a brown belt and the Renzo Gracie network, and kind of one of the so-called junior members of the Danaher Death Squad, right? He went out and he beat Geo, and he won EBI. He subbed like 3 guys on his side of the bracket, and then he took Geo and he beat Geo in the overtime. And for one of the junior members of the Danaher Death Squad to take out a guy like Geo, Gordon saw that as the green light. Okay, right, you lost to one of our younger members. Now, you've been avoiding the match with Nicky. It's time, right? What do you guys think about that? Was that a fair time to make the call out, or?
Oh, it's a very calculated and smart time. I mean, Geo's in a bit of a corner here. It's tough to ignore, especially Gordon, putting more and more money up. I think he got up to $20,000 in a Bitcoin, something like that.
Yeah, so, that's like a total of about 32 grand.
Right. So, I mean, if I was Geo, I would have a hard time responding at all. I think I'd either have to say yes or just be radio silent.
Let's be frank, right? It's kind of a lose-lose for Geo,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
It's like if he takes a match and he beats a 16-year-old kid, good for you. You beat a 16-year-old kid. If you lose to a 16-year-old kid,
that's bad for you.
Super bad.
No, but I think he kind of shuts up some of the talk coming out of Danaher Death Squad. This is Eddie Bravo came out with that statement last year that their goal was to go after the Danaher Death Squad. Here's an opportunity for him. If he's confident in his jiu-jitsu, he's the top-ranked guy, take care of it. Get it done. You're going to get paid either way. Get out there and show him what 10th Planet has.
Geo does have a win over Eddie Cummings. He beat Eddie Cummings at an EBI final in overtime, submitted him in overtime. So he does hold some win over some of the Danaher Death Squad guys, and that's probably one of the biggest wins of his career there.
Not in a while though, right? Because the Danaher Death Squad has just been mopping up the EBI competition. Every time they're invited, they win.
Yeah,
I think it was this time last year that Geo and Eddie fought.
December 2016, because we were in San Diego watching it live. I remember it was the one in Mexico City.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and let's just look at that a second. Now, if we're going to see a Danaher Death Squad versus 10th Planet match, to be honest, I don't want to see Nicky go up against Geo yet, because I feel that there's some unfinished business there with Geo and Eddie, right?
Right.
And let's put this again in context. That John Callout shouldn't have even been there, because that was Eddie Cummings' spot. And Eddie Cummings got sick, like 48 hours out from the tournament, and John stepped in as a last-minute replacement and ends up beating Geo. But I'm like, I still feel that match, it should have been Eddie Geo, right?
Maybe, but I think the juice is behind Nicky Geo. I want to see that match.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a lot of fun. I love seeing what Nicky Ryan can do, and he's constantly risen to the occasion. And Geo might be his biggest test yet.
And I think it's going to happen too. This is one of those situations where Nicky has everything to win, you guys say, but I feel like Nicky's already on the path to greatness, right? He's already the youngest kid in ADCC. He's gonna meet up with these guys eventually.
Yeah.
Why not do it now?
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
100%.
I mean, he's going to be in Geo's weight class potentially. I'm sure he'll be going after an invite in 2019, so they could see each other in 2019 at ADCC. And Nicky's not unbeatable. He lost to AJ, and he had a super fight with Kennedy, Cabrinha's son, that we did at Studio 540, and that was kind of a submission-only esque match, and he ended up getting submitted by Kennedy in overtime.
That's right.
There.
So you're saying this might be the only chance that Geo has to actually beat
Well,
Nicky.
I'm just saying he's certainly capable of beating Nicky. That much is clear for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't take anything away from Geo. 2-time ADCC veteran, multiple-time EBI winner. The guy's good.
And he's very young in the sport too. And I really liked his Instagram post where he said, you know, that like, hey man, I'm still looking for my shot too, you know. And I can definitely sympathize with him there. You know, he's had some big matches in 2015 at ADCC where he made to the third place match against Bruno Frazado. And so he's had some good matches. He hasn't quite had a huge breakout moment. Maybe it is versus Eddie Cummings there at EBI. But I think the future is still very bright for Geo as well as it is Nicky.
One thing I have to highlight, though, is the difference in tone between Gordon's posts and Geo's responses. Because Gordon, he's well known that he really likes to get under people's skin. Man, some of his attacks this week were, let's be straight, they were brutal, right? He was going after various members of the 10th Planet team. And Geo was, well, I mean, anybody who's met Geo knows he's so laid back, he's super chill, and he's very respectful in his responses, right?
He knows Gordon's playing the game, right? And Gordon's game can really affect you if you don't read it for what it is. And I really respected Geo's responses. You know, he realized he had to say something, and why not take the match on his own terms? But what do you guys think in general of social media call-outs, making matches happen, and sort of really forcing a match, forcing someone's hand?
Especially Gordon too, because Gordon can really strong arm some people. You know, just with the way he's kind of risen through social media. A lot of his rise from brown belt to one of the best black belts in the world has gone along with his social media rise. So I think he's got a big fan base, got a lot of clout, like I said. So he can really strong arm some people, unlike anybody else probably in Jiu-Jitsu.
Well, he's trying to pass off a little bit of that magic onto his brother, right? Because Nicky's pretty quiet on social media. I mean, you almost never see Nicky posting. Yeah. Gordon made his name via all these high cash prize call-outs and putting, like, you know, winner takes all 10 grand and stuff.
To answer Chase's question, I think it's great. I think this day and age, you have the ability to self-promote yourself like never before. And, you know, this is a combat sport. We're not playing, you know, tennis here. Like, you're going out to fight somebody. So, like, it all is part of the sport, and I think it's awesome. I think it makes for entertaining jiu-jitsu.
Yes, it does. And we actually ran a poll on our website of who the fans would like to see, and overwhelmingly they voted in favor of Nicky versus Geo. And well, it seems like it's just a matter of time before that match is going to happen, right? We actually polled a little bit as well on the results, on who they think would win. And no, that was a little bit closer. So it seems that it's slightly in favor of Nicky beating Geo. And only slightly, only a few % in that format. But if we were to see a match, how would we think we would go?
What are the rules here? Are we doing submission only? Are we doing overtime? This matters.
Good point. It does matter, right? Because I think obviously Geo would prefer EBI rules, right? No surprise. I'm sure that Nicky and those guys, if they could, they would go for a no time limit submission only. But I mean, regardless, how do we think that kind of match will play out?
That's interesting. I mean, they're both. Well, I guess Geo's a little taller, a little longer, a little lankier than Nicky.
Got the man strength.
Yeah, he's going to be a little older as well. But from all accounts, that everybody tells us that Nicky is a savage on the mats, to steal a word, you know? So Gordon says that he's like one of his best training partners, right? So, man, I don't know.
Says the man selling his fight, though, you know? Brother believes in brother.
Actually, one thing we hear from everybody in the team is they all say that this kid is going to be the best of all of us. So anything that Gary Tonon's accomplished, anything that Gordon's accomplished, Nicky's going to eclipse it all. Yeah. That's what they're saying.
I mean, look at the room, right? He's training with those guys at 16 and younger than that. So.
And I do think that, you know, belts. You know, I think Nicky's a purple belt right now. You know, so it's just so funny how belts can, you know, distinguish people, but the level they're so close. I'm sure it's going to be a very close match, but I think I would have to give it to Geo, because I think when the skill level is so close. Geo's been in the big matches. Geo's been has gone through the ADCC further, has had bigger matches at EBI and things like that, and has more experience in those matches. So I think when the level is so close, I have to give it to the guy who has more experience, who's been in those positions.
Yeah, he's got no shortage of experience against the Danaher Death Squad guys as well. I mean, the Calistine match was decided on overtime, you know, the fastest escape. So, you know, he's no problem in avoiding the the well-known Renzo Gracie system style of leg lock attacks. But remember that match with Eddie and Geo, and Geo just shut down Eddie's leg lock game, and then he like tied him up with the spiderweb position and stuff.
Got that crazy armbar.
That
so
was,
fast.
I mean,
yeah.
that was smart. So like you say, that experience goes a long way, right?
I don't necessarily think that we will see a battle of the leg locks, although both of them are very versed in that. You know, watching some of Nicky's fight to win fights, he goes right at the guy. He tries to pass the guard. He takes the back, and Geo as well. You know, he's not just a one-trick pony. Where some of the other guys out there, I'd say, kind of rely on those skills. These guys are both very versed, so I think it would be a great matchup, and who knows what would happen.
Mm-hmm. That's what makes it fun, right?
I think to get back to predictions, it was a close match between AJ and Nicky, but I really think AJ was pretty safe that whole round and played it like a gentleman, more or less, and the experience showed. And I think Geo might not play this like a gentleman. I mean, he might come out after Nicky when it all comes down to it to prove a point, and the experience might be a little much. So, you know, I think Nicky is a rising star, and each year he'll become better and better. But I think the odds might be slightly in favor for Geo.
Well, fingers crossed we see that match happen
Absolutely.
sooner rather than later. And speaking of upcoming matches, we got a bunch coming up on FloGrappling over the next couple of weeks. Events pretty much every single weekend. So got a ton of fight to win events. Those guys are all over the US, bringing the highest quality super fights live on FloGrappling pretty much every single weekend. And don't forget, of course, next month, March 7th through 11th is the IBJJF PANS. This is one of the Grand Slam IBJJF tournaments, one of the biggest of the year. And we've been scanning the divisions, and we're expecting big things from that. The black belts are starting to sign up now. Last few days of registration, and we're expecting a few big names to pop in there as well. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We were going to roll a video, but unfortunately technical problems means that today, this is it for another episode of A Fistful of Collars. Guys, anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
If you're not watching Tim Spriggs versus Rafael Lovato this weekend, you're definitely making a mistake. That goes down tomorrow.
Absolutely. Guys, there it is. Another one in the bag. We'll see you again next week. Peace.